I'm used in England to talking to Anglican groups about gay issues, and they're predominantly women. And suddenly the sex has changed. My speech is more or less the same, but everything, I'm wondering whether the punchline is the same. We shall see. I don't have a great deal to offer you. I suspect that you know more about these issues than I do. I come to you nonetheless as your brother and a gay man, although when Charlie Rose asked me some years ago whether I thought myself a gay writer, I said, no, I thought of myself as a morose writer. I come to you also as a fellow Catholic. I don't know exactly how to describe my Catholicism at the moment, but I'm there, and in London, where we live half the year, Jim and I, we go to the Latin Mass at 11 o'clock for reasons that have more to do with me than with him. I'm also an American, and I celebrate with you on this birthday of this remarkable wounded country. I am also a writer, and I think that's why I'm here, but that's the first mistake that you have made during this convention. You should have invited a nice politician, somebody who has nice things to say, or a sociologist, someone who's maybe been on Oprah. Or writers, as everybody knows, have nothing to offer. They muck things up. Some years ago, I wrote an essay, sort of my coming out essay. It was called Late Victorians. It was published in Harper's Magazine. It was about the death of Cesar, my first friend who died of AIDS. Died in this city, a remarkable man, Argentinian, who died in this city in the 1980s. And how I sort of came to terms with my homosexuality, emptying bedpans. And the piece is very hard. It is ironic, and I used to think that gays were masters of irony because we always dealt with the double entendre, that we had to say one thing and mean another. But unfortunately, we were living through an age in the 1980s of great pain and a certain amount of political correctness, and I apologize to the member from GLAAD because, in fact, there was a demonstration by GLAAD at Harper's Magazine where the piece was published, demands that the magazine retract its relationship with me, and a lot of nastiness. So that's who you've invited. Anyway, I got the brochure for this convention, and it said something about reaching the promised land, and I began immediately brooding over that, reaching the promised land, because I thought to myself about that morning in summer several years ago when we drove in, Jim and I drove into the American Colony Hotel in Jerusalem, reaching the promised land indeed. The American Colony Hotel is in East Jerusalem. It tends to be favored by movie stars and by journalists, and is a suspicious destination for Orthodox Jews. I invited a number of rabbis to breakfast, and they would say immediately when they sat down, this is the first time I've ever been at this place. And then one of the rabbis said, this must be the first time a Jew has ever been at this place. Welcome to Jerusalem. Welcome to the Promised Land. Anyway, the National Geographic was paying for this whole project. I had been traveling around the deserts of the Middle East for some time. I had actually been drawn by September 11th closer to Islam, closer to Judaism. I've been forced by the violence of that day, of September 11th, to recognize the violence within my own belief, and to recognize that I was like the Muslim who was praying even as the 757 broke into the glass of the World Trade Center. I was also a son of Abraham. Children of Abraham. We troubled children. Some of us are children of Sarah. Some of us are children of Hagar, the Egyptian slave who bore his first son. I've always found that story very troubling, the story of Hagar and the way she is cast into the desert. But I like the story generally of Abraham, who is promised by this strange trio that approaches one day, this dry old man, that he will be fertile. And Sarah, who's overhearing, like Rhea Perlman in the other room, sticks out her head and says, "Oh yeah." But it's a wonderful desert story that the dry land could be fertile again, that Israel could be a green place. I've been driven by this notion of the desert, that the God that we Jews, Christians, Muslims profess to adore is a desert God who came to us not in the forest or not on a green plain, but on a landscape of almost lunar desolation. Why? What is there about the desert that made this the appropriate location for the revelation? This place where water is the difference between life and death, this place in which water is salvation, this place in which the tribe is a necessity, because if you are in the desert by yourself, it is a dangerous place to be. So there are, in the desert cultures, there are tribal chieftains as fierce as anywhere in the world, who rule over the tribe and brook no unorthodoxy. Though Muhammad, Moses, Jesus, they all went into the desert at various times alone. And the desert protected them. You who call yourselves Dignity, sometimes I think to myself as I'm wandering around the desert with a sunblock and a straw hat on this uninhabitable, unwelcoming landscape, that the desert does not welcome us in easy ways. Getting to the promised land is a difficult, arduous journey. There is dust. There is heat. And your lips will cake from the heat. Sometimes when I'm in San Francisco and I go to Gold's Gym, the great pagan temple in the Castro district, and it is with some discouragement that as a middle-aged man I go, also with some obvious pleasure. But I am struck by the images along Market Street as I go to Gold's Gym, at health food stores and billboards and HIV ads that all present the face of the gay man in San Francisco as this muscled boy next door. Smiling, always smiling. We are happy, glad people. No one is broken in San Francisco. In fact, a friend of mine was working on an HIV campaign recently, and he showed me these posters, and they all looked like Tab Hunter. And Tab Hunter when he was in his 20s, not Tab Hunter. Tab Hunter looks like us now, but in his 20s he did not look like us. And I said to Bill, couldn't you get somebody who looks sick in one of these pictures? And he said, I want to make clear to people that you can live with this illness.